I'll record on this computer. So we're okay. I think we're recording now. Good evening, Shank. Thank you for taking the time for this podcast. I understand you've been living in Rome for 2 years, taking up communications and digital media. On the side, you're also pursuing filmmaking, working with local Italian artists such as Nashe, a black DJ and producer, and others. Um, So first of all, what brought you to Italy and how long did you stay?
Um, I stayed there for 2 years in Rome. I was, yeah, as you said, I was in the American University of Rome. I was doing communications and digital media. And in all honesty, like, well, you know this, I took a gap year after we graduated from Brent, but I applied everywhere. I applied in the States, well, one school in the States. I applied in the UK. I applied to Australia. But honestly, like, when I was applying, it was very, I don't know, I was also very indecisive. I mean, hence why I took the gap year. But like when I was applying to all these schools, I wasn't necessarily like excited, I guess you'd say, to like receive that like congratulations email. Or I didn't really feel like, I don't know, so I didn't feel drawn to anywhere else I was applying to until I was like, you know what? Why not try Rome? And so I applied to a school in Rome, and I knew it was the right decision for me because I was like actually scared to like receive a decision from them. So I was like, okay, the fact that I'm scared to receive like if I got in or if I didn't from Rome is already a sign that there is something in me that wants to be there. And that's honestly kind of how I knew.
That's awesome. So can you share a memorable experience you had in Italy?
Yeah, this is something I always tell people. And it actually happened like, I don't know, within the first 2 months of me living in Rome. So my first apartment, I lived in three apartments. My first apartment was super near Piazza Navona. And my first weeks in Rome, so I was still like settling in. I was still very much getting like acclimated with the culture and the people there. And my apartment was in the second floor. So in this apartment building, there was no elevators. And I was doing groceries one day, and I was taking a lime, just for the vibes.
Yeah.
And after I was doing groceries, I went back to my apartment and I saw this older lady who was there. I think she was a nonna, which means grandmother in Italian. And she was having trouble, like, bring her groceries up or just even going up the stairs. So I don't know how she does this every day. So I offered to kind of help her with her groceries. And there was already like a language barrier because this was still me, like fresh in Rome. So I didn't even know like the language yet. Um, so we are kind of just conversing like however we wanted to. And so I offered to help her with her groceries. She invited me to her place, and then she made me carbonara. And it was probably the best carbonara pasta I've ever tried. My whole time in Rome, I still think of that. I'm like, yeah, this doesn't really defeat like anything she's made because she made it for me in scratch, like from scratch. Like she did the pasta on her own sauce and everything. It wasn't like store bought.
Okay. How was the communication like without because you said that you weren't fluent in Italian at the time. So how was the communication? How was it like?
Well, she knew. I'm not gonna lie. Like, she did know English, but super little, to the
Mhm.
point where like she knew words, and like I think you can kind of like go off them, and like thankfully I'm like pretty good in Spanish, so a lot of Italian words are similar in Spanish. So I was
Right.
able to kind of understand what she was saying. It's definitely the pronunciation that's different and it's more expressive, but I was going off like context clues, and I was like, if I didn't know how to say it in Italian, I just go and say it in like Spanish,
Okay.
which
Um,
worked.
so next question. How did you engage with the local community during your stay? Um, yeah.
So, how I engage with the local community, I think one thing I always tell people, especially when they move abroad into a country that they don't speak the language in, is like, don't do what the tourists do. I mean, I did what the tourists did, like, or does when they're in Rome, but I did that like my first 2 weeks in Rome. Like, I went to the Trevi, I went to the Vatican, I went to Piazza Navona, which is like, a plaza or whatever. So like eventually when I started school, most of my friends, by the way, aren't from my school. They're actually Italians who live in Italy, who live in different parts of Italy, and um, they kind of taught me the language and all that. But I started to explore like non-touristy areas, like people where you wouldn't really find like English speaking people. So it was interesting also because I've met, or in my third apartment, I lived around a lot of Filipinos, which was honestly like, I don't know, like it was comforting, obviously, because it was like a sense of
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
They, these are Filipinos who moved to Italy or who moved to Rome at such a young age that they already forgot most of the Filipino culture. They forgot the language. So it was definitely like an exchange. Like they were teaching me Italian, I was teaching them Tagalog, and just like Filipino culture in general. But yeah, I guess I would say like how I engaged mainly was doing what locals would do rather than doing what like international students or study
Mhm.
abroad would do.
I get
And
that.
really,
I understand on your free time, besides school and filmmaking, you also worked in a coffee shop. How was that experience?
it was good. It was, I mean, they were obviously needing like, I worked because they asked, I worked under the table, by the way. So it was very much an exchange because they needed someone who could speak English. But then again, like I also learned a lot from that. Like, yes, regardless if I was speaking English on the job, I was still learning a lot about Italians because all my other workers were Italian. But this was during like my first semester, so my first time in Rome. It was definitely good though. Like I
Hmm.
learned a lot. It
How
was so
long did you
new, so
work for?
foreign, huh?
How long did you work there for?
So 4 months.
4 months. Wow, that's insane. Okay, so how did your perspective of Italy change in the 2 years you lived there?
Over the course of my 2 years in Italy, my perspective on the city was more of like, well, okay. When I moved, it was definitely like my perspective was like, oh, I'm gonna live like the Italian lifestyle. So like what I saw in movies on TikTok, it was like extremely romanticized. And obviously I lived there for 2 years. So eventually I wasn't a tourist. I was more of like a person living in this country. I wouldn't say I'm a local because I'm still like getting like acclimated and stuff like that. But eventually, like as I lived there even more, I realized that the life in Italy is way harder and not as glamour as we see in movies or social media. So my thoughts on Italians also changed. I thought like when I moved, they were so rude because they were so like expressive and like like they're very expressive with their hands, their like voice, they're super like there's a lot of aggression in a sense. I'd say aggression, but in the most polite manner probably.
Yeah,
But eventually like this turned into like I realized they were the most affectionate and caring people, which kind of reminded me of people in the Philippines. It's
very,
just their way of expressing themselves, I guess.
very interesting. So this you kind of talked about this a little bit, but what are some aspects of living in Italy that were different than in the Philippines? Like besides that.
Mm. Okay. Well, I think one important thing to point out that a lot of us in the Philippines have a house. We have people to come home to. We have helpers. We have drivers. I'm not saying every one of us has them, but a lot of us grew up very privileged in the Philippines, and I think moving abroad independently, like my parents didn't go with me to Rome. Like I was completely on my own. Like the
Yeah.
minute I got to Naia airport, I was like, all right, I'm on my own. Like I had to figure out how to do my visa on my own. I had to figure out how to do my permesso di soggiorno, which is like a permit to stay. Like it's something you have to do within 60 days, I think, in Italy as a student.
Hmm.
So I was definitely figuring everything out along with the language barrier. Like I did not know how to speak Italian. So that was definitely like as much as people be like, "Oh, this is so scary to me." It was scary, of course, but like it was also so exciting for me to be like so foreign. Like I could restart my entire life. People who know me here in Rome doesn't know who I was in the Philippines, and I
Yeah.
was like, I don't know, it was a breather, I guess. So in Italy, like as part of me trying to assimilate to the Italian culture, I was taking public transport. And for those who don't know, 9 out of 10 times the bus is either extremely late or it just doesn't show up. even in good weather, it's just like that. So like imagine if it's raining, like it's probably
Yeah,
not gonna show up. So that
but
was something I had to get used to. Like I remember I took a screenshot on my phone. The bus I would take to school, which was the 872 from my second apartment, it was an hour and like 26 minutes late. And I was like, guys, like this is not normal, like this is not, but this is so normal to those who live there. And I wasn't used to this, but like eventually I got used to it. So I kind of learned to manage my time around that challenge. And one minor thing that I also found different was that people don't share their food. They order for
yeah.
themselves. And it's, I don't know, like in the Philippines, like when we're in a restaurant, we order to share, like we share it with other people at the table. Um, I guess what's also different is like the work culture.
Mhm.
People like love, I don't know, I think like Italians have their own sense of time. Like it's not a factor in what they do, it's more of just there. So it's very invisible to them. And this is so different in the Philippines, but obviously in the Philippines it's different because of the economy and the quality of life in the country.
Yeah. So moving the conversation a little bit to your journey as a filmmaker, can you describe your creative style in filmmaking?
Uh, I wouldn't say, or I wouldn't essentially say I have a creative style. I definitely think my creative style comes in when I have the type of video I want to make, but it definitely boils down to like the type of project I want to do, the type of emotions I want to convey. Sometimes I take like my camcorder and record. Sometimes I write a script. Sometimes I use the videos I already have. And sometimes I work with others. And yeah, so I guess it just boils down to like the type of videos I want to make and I don't know, type of content, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Can you describe any projects you made in Italy, in Rome?
I think this was like my last 2 months in Rome. Well, over the course of my 2 years, I met Nashe. He's a DJ and a producer, and um, one project that I made for him that I already showed you before this
Mm-hmm.
was he kind of does these things in like um, thrift stores, I guess. Like he works with other people, but every last Sunday, every last Sunday of the month he kind of performs or he DJs or he spins. And what's interesting is like when you think of like DJing, you think of like, oh, we're gonna go to a club, we're gonna go to a bar, we're gonna stay out late at night. But this DJ was like he was there from like 3 to 7 p.m. So like you're kind of home when the sun comes down. Um, which is very interesting. But another one that I made was for my podcasting class. I kind of showed my professor like my scrapbook series, the ones that I do like visually and like film,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I showed it to him and I was like, I could kind of do this for this class because like the whole thing was to kind of introduce our podcast title and then the students in that class. So I kind of did it. But I also forgot like when I was editing this video, I like realized how time consuming it was to like make these videos. Because when you're making like, at least for me, when I'm making my scrapbook series, you're not editing like per minute per second, you're editing per frame, which means like you're editing per like 0.01 second. So like millisecond, I guess.
I see. Um, how does filming in Italy compare to filming in other countries?
I would definitely say it's a challenge to be creatively driven in Italy. Um, but only because I was there for school. I had grades to maintain, I had a social life to maintain, I had other things to maintain.
Mhm.
So I guess we can say like there were a lot of distractions. Again, as I said, like it obviously boils down to the type of project I want to create. And um, so I made a little tribute like a video to those people I met in Rome, certain moments in Rome. Um, these little moments in my head that I know will be engraved in me like forever. Like I recorded this little video that I put in the video that I'm sharing with you. Is
Mhm.
me with my friend Kia. We were in Piazza España, which is the Spanish Steps, at like 3 a.m. And as a tourist, when you're there, you're so used to being there when the sun is out and when it's packed. So like there are hundreds of people on those steps. But
Yeah,
when I was there, it was empty. So I was like, these are like the little moments. Like I would be in the Trevi fountain at
yeah,
3 a.m. and there's no one there. So it's
yeah.
like, I don't know. I made this video that you'll see it, I guess.
I've
hopefully.
also experienced that. When I went to Italy, I Airbnb'd an apartment right above the Spanish Steps. So at nighttime, I could see that like during the daytime, people would set up their what do you call that? Their when people would just do their magic tricks or whatever, these
Yeah.
things like that.
It's
But at
also
nighttime,
like different. Like I guess like if you were there, because when I was there in the Spanish Steps, yeah, we were alone, but there were also other people there. But the people who were actually around us were locals.
yeah,
They were like drinking in the Spanish Steps. They were just talking, and you don't see that during the day because most of the time during the day it's full of tourists.
um, so you were talking about working with Nashe earlier, in from 3 to 7 with this DJ set. How was the community like there when he would perform? And
Uh, Inside of community, let's say like creative community. Like
Mhm.
before I like talk about that, the creative community in Rome, it's very hidden. Like I wouldn't say it's definitely underground. Like it's something you have to tap into. It's not something that you're just given or you see. Um, so yeah, it's not like compared to like other European countries like Berlin, Paris, or cities, it's like there are a lot of creative people. Like you could find them very easily, but in Rome it's
Mhm.
depends. I get it depends on the type of people you surround yourself with. It's the places that you go. But yeah, like I know a handful of creatives in Rome, from producers, DJs, filmmakers, painters, and others. But yeah, as I said, it's very hidden. And I guess like my experience with Nashe is that first and foremost, we're friends before we actually work together.
Mhm.
We haven't worked together yet, but we do have plans of working together, regardless if I'm not in Rome anymore. But as I said, like the community when Nashe was spinning, it's very diverse, it's very creative, and it's like these are the people that I don't normally see, but I do know of them. So yeah, it definitely inspires me a lot more because I'm like, when my first year in Rome, I was like, oh, there's actually it's hard to find like a creative scene here, but
Can you
eventually, like you said,
on what you mean by it's more creative in that community than outside? So,
I guess it's like, I think you tap into that bubble. Like when I say like it's more creative there, it's just because there are more people who actually have the same shared experiences as you compared to outside. Like it's harder to find, like, yes, people are creative, but like it's harder to find people with similar mindsets in terms of like creativity in a sense, because it's like, yeah, I could meet a painter outside of like this bubble, right? But what we do is completely different. I do film, you're painting, that's completely different things. And obviously, yes, DJing and filming is also completely different things, but I think those two kind of go hand in hand more compared to if I was to collaborate with a painter. But yeah, so I think we bonded more over like the fact that, oh, I could record music videos for you in the future. Oh, I could make concept videos for you in the future. Yeah, as I said, like I left Rome, but we still definitely keep in touch and we have projects coming up,
let's see.
hopefully.
In terms of cultural representation, how do you represent cultural diversity and integration in your films?
It's a very good question. Well, first and foremost, I think it's also important to talk about like one of the films that I plan on doing, especially this summer, was I wanted to showcase the life in Siargao. And
Siargao is
like I
in the Philippines. It's an island in the Philippines.
Yes, like for those who don't know, Siargao is one of my favorite islands in the Philippines. It's the surfing capital in the Philippines. It's like right or super near Cebu. So yes, like we in the Philippines we call ourselves Filipino, but I think what a lot of people forget is that people who come from the province, the islands, compared to if you were to come from the city, like our terms of culture is so different. Like we have a different way of seeing life if we grew up in the city. They have a different way of seeing life when they grew up in the island or in the province. And this is what something people fail to recognize. And I wanted to tell a story on that because the reason I love the island so much is not because it's like really nice beaches. Like, yes, of course, that's a factor. But one of the main factors is that the locals who live there actually
Or
make
the
you fall in.
authenticity, you think?
Sorry?
Or the authenticity of the people and their
Yeah,
way of
like
creating that with you.
it's it's the mindset. And as a creative, like or maybe for me, like mindset is so important to me. And I find the mindset that I'm like driven towards with a lot of the locals from the island, not specifically Siargao, but the island itself. And I also find a lot of people like creative nomads who go there and live there and pursue their other passions there. So it's definitely inspiring to me because I know that okay, there are other creative people here. So, you can work together, you can have good conversations, um, and stuff like that. But when you say cultural diversity and how I integrate that, as I said, like we fail to recognize that culture is different from where we are, from the city. Like, yes, we're all Filipino, but
Even like within a country, culture can feel so different in different
yeah,
places.
like if I was to film a movie about the Philippines and my main character is an upper class citizen, it would be so much more different. Like, yes, it's similar, I guess, but it would be so much more different to the culture that is portrayed if I was to film a lower class citizen,
Of
because the
course.
way of life is so different. And yes, they share the same culture, but the value of that culture differentiates. So I think when you represent a culture, when you integrate a culture in your film, you have to keep an open mind.
Mhm.
But I don't know. For me, it's also like don't think of it that much, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So like it's
at
I
the
don't know,
over.
it's like yeah, it's finding a balance, like a healthy balance before it kind of drives you crazy. So again, like the film that I'm choosing to share with you in my last weeks in Rome, it's like some people when they watch it they can be like there's no culture in this film. And yeah, maybe you're right, but it's the aesthetic of the film, it's the slow-paced manner that I kind of purposely embedded within the film. It to kind of showcase like Italians' idea or perception towards time. Like time doesn't really exist in Italy, and everyone has their own concept of time. So people love to sit for hours. They love to walk. They love to talk without the need of feeling rushed. And I don't know. Hopefully, my film kind of showcases that like concept of time.
I see. So, shifting it back to like a little bit about Italy, what were some of the challenges you faced as a filmmaker in Italy? And as a follow-up question, how does that differ to your experiences filmmaking in the Philippines?
Um, I would definitely say they were they weren't challenges. I definitely say there were more obstacles that I kind of had to like
Okay.
overcome. But I also wouldn't say it filmmaker. I'd just say as a creative because in Italy, yes, I did feel a little burnt out, like creatively burnt out. So I didn't really feel like creatively driven to like create anything. Definitely, I lived more in my head in Italy, but only because, then again, like I was there as a student. I had other social distractions to kind of attend to. Like I was a student before I'm a creative there. I had grades to maintain. I had people to talk to. I had people to see all the time. So it's different. And like to go back to your second question, like if I'm here in the Philippines, um, I think I have more time with myself here. So it definitely gives me more time to think and more time to actually put action in my words rather than just talk and be like, oh, I want to make this. Like here in the Philippines, I feel like if I say, oh, I want to make this, I'd actually do it because I think here in the Philippines, I'm not a student anymore. I'm just here for the summer. So then like time is a thing and I'm like, and a lot of the things that I want to do and the ideas that I come up with involve a lot of things in the Philippines. Like the film that I recently made, it's called Still. I had that idea. I talked to you about this actually when I was in Madrid before summer even started. When I
Mhm.
was in Madrid, when I was in Rome, but it was an idea that I had for when I visited Siargao this year. So it's definitely different, I guess.
I see. So, what lessons did you learn from Italian culture that you carry with you today?
I think one thing that I definitely do carry with me is the concept of time and that I really allowed myself to be just more lenient. Like, I don't know, I feel like when you're in the Philippines, you feel so rushed because traffic and all of that. Like, indeed, we have like this Filipino time, like, we're always late, but
Yeah.
that's also like we rush ourselves to things. Yeah, but like no one understands how bad the traffic is. And I also realized this, like, when I was going to Alabang, like, um, I would waste like how long it would take. And sometimes it would be like an hour and 12 minutes, but I'd get there in like 40 minutes. So I'm just like, even Waze is wrong in the Philippines. Like, I don't trust anything here. The weather app, I don't trust. It says it's gonna rain in Siargao when I was there, barely rained. So I'm
Mhm.
like, there are a lot of things that I don't trust. But So yeah, I brought concept of time. So I allowed myself to just be more relaxed with my time here. Um, Definitely their way of life, like their perception on life, like they do a lot of things very lightly. So yeah, they do a lot of things lightly within like the most mundane activities, and yet they are still so happy. And I find this not in the city, not in Manila, but in Siargao. Like people love to
This
romanticize, let's
the
say.
same type of energy you think.
Yeah, like the energy is completely the same. Like, yes, I lived in the city in Italy, but when I'm in the islands of the Philippines, I find like a balance, some balance that I felt there too. So yeah, I learned to find like joy in the most minuscule things. I also think I'm more affectionate now compared to like years ago. Like I wouldn't mind like making best of more people. I wouldn't mind like hugging people longer and stuff like that. Like I used to hate physical touch before. Now I'm like kind of drawn
Mhm.
towards it.
And that's
I
because
guess.
of you think.
Yeah,
Because
like they're super affectionate. Like I if you meet someone, they'll probably like make you best like someone. They're just very hands-on. And I guess if you're not there with an open mind, you think like you'll feel super uncomfortable, but also you have to understand that this isn't your culture. This is a completely new culture to you. So it's like I know accepting it with an open mind and just
how
being
about the,
open to it, I guess.
yeah, I see. How about the concept of bella figura? Are you familiar with that concept? It's the one of dressing up dressing up really well. What is your take?
Uh yeah, no, I know that. I feel like that's in Europe in general. So I
Mhm.
think not just Italy, but my term of like dressing up is completely different to how people in Rome dress up. Like they dress up very business attire, like very casual. Um, so their sense of style is definitely different, I guess, compared to if you were to go to Paris, if you were to go to Berlin, London. I know London, like Brexit and all that, but like I don't know. It's super different, but yeah, you can't like sometimes when I'm here, like I'm going to the groceries, I leave with like flip flops, like my chanelas, like my shorts, like my Brent shorts, and like a hoodie. Like you wouldn't see me doing that in Rome because people do like love to judge you, but
Yeah, yeah. So do you think
don't
people
think.
judge you more about what you wear there?
I think in Europe or in Italy, it's just more direct. Like you could tell, I guess, versus here, like it's more indirect. Like you probably think they're judging you and then they're not. But there you could like it's easily like I can be like, oh yeah, this person's judging me because of what I'm wearing. There, compared to here, it's different.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Shank. That's the end of the interview. And yeah, I'll be publishing all of Shank's videos. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.